My sister-in-law spent 2 years trying to destroy my marriage because she wanted her best friend to be my husband's wife instead of me. What she doesn't know is that I own the place she's living in. She started small, forgetting to invite me to family dinners, telling me the wrong time for birthday parties, cropping me out of photos she posted online. Sorry, must have slipped my mind, she'd say with that fake smile. I tried talking to my husband Ryan about it, but he always defended her. She's just protective. We're really close. Give her time. The thing about Natalie was she knew exactly how to work him. She'd been manipulating him since they were kids. She'd cry about how I was changing him, how he never spent time with family anymore, how I was isolating him. None of it was true, but she was good at the tears. Then her best friend Ashley moved back to town after her divorce. Suddenly Ashley was at every family event, sitting next to Ryan, laughing at his stories, bringing his favorite beer. Natalie would seat us at opposite ends of the table, put Ashley right beside him. Ashley's having such a hard time, Natalie would say. Ryan, you should help her fix her car. You're so good with those things. And he'd go, because he was helpful like that. Natalie would text me the wrong address for restaurants, then act shocked when I showed up late to find Ashley in my seat. We didn't think you were coming, so Ashley sat down. You don't mind, right? She'd invite Ashley to stay at their mother's house during holidays when we visited, knowing there weren't enough bedrooms, suggesting Ryan and Ashley could share the pull-out couch while I took the uncomfortable armchair. It just makes sense space-wise, she'd say. The worst part was how calculated it all was. She never did anything obvious enough for Ryan to see it. When I'd bring it up, she'd twisted everything. I'm trying so hard to include you, but you're always so negative. Maybe if you were friendlier, warmer, more like family. She'd say this in front of everyone, making me look like the difficult one. The breaking point came last Christmas. Natalie planned a huge family trip, told everyone except me it was happening. When I found out 2 days before, she said, "Oh, I thought Ryan told you. Well, there's no more room in the cabin now. Ashley's coming since she's alone for the holidays. But you understand, right? Ryan went without me. Posted pictures of them all by the fireplace. Ashley wearing the Christmas sweater his mom bought her. The same mom who still called me Ryan's wife after 6 years. Never my actual name. When he came back, I was done. Not because I thought he cheated. He didn't. But because he couldn't see what was happening. Wouldn't believe me over his sister. Chose them every single time. If you can't see how she's destroying us, then maybe we shouldn't be together," I told him. He said I was being paranoid, jealous, controlling. So we divorced. Quick, clean, no fighting over assets. He kept his retirement, I kept mine. He got the house his parents helped with. I got our investments. We both cried signing the papers. "I still love you," he said. "I love you too," I said. But love isn't enough when your family is actively against us. Natalie was thrilled. She helped him move out, organized a fresh start party, invited Ashley, of course. She even moved into the luxury apartment downtown to be closer to him, help him through the divorce, she said. The 1,200 square foot apartment with the doorman and rooftop pool. She posted pictures constantly. So blessed to have this space. Living my best life. Sometimes good things come from bad situations. She had no idea that apartment was part of my investment portfolio. I'd bought it 5 years ago before I even met Ryan. It was in my company's name, managed by a property firm. Natalie never asked who owned it, just saw it online and applied. The property manager didn't know she was my sister-in-law. Why would they? Different last names, no connection. She'd been living there 8 months when she threw Ryan and Ashley's engagement party. Yeah, they got engaged. Natalie's dream come true. She posted about hosting it in her beautiful apartment. How perfect everything was. How Ashley was the sister she'd always wanted. I waited until the week after the party to show up. Told the doorman I was there for a property inspection. He let me right up. I had all the documentation. Natalie answered in her yoga clothes, wine glass in hand at 2 in the afternoon. Her face when she saw me was priceless. "What are you doing here?" "Property inspection," I said, walking past her. "I need to check for damages, review the unit. You can't just barge in here. I have rights. Actually, as the owner, I have the right to inspect with proper notice, which was sent last week." I pulled out the paperwork. Her face went white. She grabbed for the papers, but I held them back. I walked past her into the living room and started taking photos with my phone. The apartment looked different from the listing photos. She'd painted one wall dark gray without permission. I documented that. She followed me around, talking fast about how she didn't know, how this was crazy, how we were family. I moved to the kitchen and found she'd replaced the cabinet hardware with expensive brass pulls. More photos. The granite countertop had a crack near the stove that wasn't in the move-in inspection report. I wrote notes on my tablet while she kept saying she'd been the perfect tenant, always paid on time, never caused problems. I agreed with her about the rent payments. My property management company had no complaints about that, but the lease was clear about modifications. She needed written approval for any changes. She didn't have it. I moved to the bedroom and found scuff marks on the hardwood floors, probably from moving furniture for that engagement party. The bathroom had a new shower curtain rod installed, drilled right into the tile. I photographed everything. She was getting louder now, saying I had no right to do this, that I was harassing her. I pulled out the inspection notice from my folder. It had been sent to her email and mailed to the apartment 10 days ago. She went quiet. I finished documenting the second bedroom she used as an office. Then I told her I'd seen enough. The violations would be reported to the property management company through normal channels. She asked what that meant. I explained that unauthorized modifications and evidence of overcrowding from the party were lease violations. The management company would send her an official notice. She'd have 30 days to fix the issues or face penalties. Her hands were shaking harder now. She asked if I was going to evict her. I said that wasn't my decision to make. The property management company handled all tenant relations. If she corrected the violations within 30 days, there wouldn't be a problem. She started crying then, the same tears she'd used on Ryan for years. I packed up my tablet and folder. She followed me to the door, asking if we could talk about this, work something out between us. I told her everything would go through proper channels. She was a tenant, I was the property owner, and the management company would handle all communication. I left her standing in the doorway and took the elevator down. I sat in my car in the parking garage and called Waverly. She answered on the second ring. I explained that I'd just done an inspection at Unit 407 and discovered the tenant was my former sister-in-law. Waverly was quiet for a moment. Then she asked if that was going to be a problem. I said no, that I wanted everything handled exactly by the book. No special treatment either way. I walked her through what I'd found. The unauthorized paint, the cabinet hardware, the shower rod installation, the floor damage and signs of the party that exceeded occupancy limits. Waverly took notes. She said she'd prepare the standard violation notice and send it within 48 hours. I asked her to document everything carefully. If Natalie tried to claim harassment or discrimination, I wanted a paper trail showing she was treated like any other tenant. Waverly understood she'd been managing properties for 15 years. She knew how to handle difficult situations. We agreed she'd be the only point of contact for Natalie going forward. I wouldn't interact with her directly about tenancy issues. Waverly would copy me on all official correspondence but handle all communication. I thanked her and ended the call. My phone rang while I was driving home. Ryan's name on the screen. I hadn't heard from him in 4 months, not since the divorce was finalized. I answered. He started yelling before I could say hello. Natalie called him crying about how I'd ambushed her at home, violated her privacy, threatened to evict her. He said I was harassing his family and he'd get a restraining order if I didn't stop. I waited until he ran out of steam. Then I asked if he was finished. He demanded to know what gave me the right to show up at Natalie's apartment. I told him I owned the building. He went silent. I explained that I'd bought that property 5 years ago as an investment, before I even met him. It was in my company's name, managed by a property firm. Natalie applied like any other tenant. The property manager had no idea we were connected. He said that was impossible, too convenient. I told him I'd sent him the documentation. He said I was lying. I said fine, check your email in 5 minutes. I pulled over and forwarded him everything from my phone. The original purchase documents from 5 years ago showing the date and my LLC as the buyer. The property management contract. The inspection notice that was sent to Natalie's address last week. I attached photos of the violations I'd found. Then I called him back. He answered but didn't say anything. I could hear him breathing, probably looking at the files I'd sent. I asked if he'd seen enough. He made a sound like he was trying to speak but couldn't. I told him this was a legitimate business matter. I owned the property. Natalie was a tenant. She had lease violations that needed to be addressed. Everything was handled through the property management company according to standard procedures. He finally spoke, asking why I never mentioned owning that building. I said it never came up. We were married. I had multiple investment properties. He never asked about my portfolio. He went quiet again. I told him the management company would send Natalie an official notice. If she corrected the violations, there wouldn't be a problem. If he had questions, he could contact them directly. Then I ended the call. 2 days later, Waverly called to say she'd sent the official notice to Natalie. It listed all the violations with photos and gave her 30 days to remedy them, or face penalties up to and including lease termination. The notice was identical to what any tenant would receive. Waverly said Natalie had already called the office 3 times. She kept demanding to speak to the real owner, insisting the LLC structure was fake. Waverly explained that many property owners use business entities. Natalie didn't believe her. She wanted my personal contact information. Waverly refused, citing company policy. All tenant communication went through the management office. Natalie threatened to sue. Waverly calmly told her she had every right to seek legal counsel, but the violations were documented and the notice was valid. Natalie hung up on her. I thanked Waverly for handling it professionally. She said it was actually easier than some tenant situations she'd dealt with. At least Natalie was just angry, not dangerous. My assistant buzzed me 3 days later saying someone was here to see me without an appointment. I asked who. She said a woman named Natalie. I told her to send Natalie in. She walked into my office looking different. No yoga clothes this time. She wore a dress and heels, had done her makeup carefully. She smiled and asked if we could talk. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. She sat down and started with an apology. She said she'd been thinking about how she treated me during my marriage to Ryan. She realized she'd been protective to the point of being hurtful. She wanted to start fresh, move forward as family. I listened without responding. She kept talking, saying she understood now that I'd always cared about Ryan. She'd been wrong to push me away. Maybe we could have coffee sometime, really get to know each other. Her eyes were watching my face, calculating. I recognized that look. She was trying to find the angle that would work on me. I told her that our relationship now was landlord and tenant. It would remain professional and be handled entirely through the property management company. She blinked. Her smile got tighter. She shifted tactics, leaning forward and saying she knew I was hurt about what happened with the marriage. She understood, but she hoped I wouldn't take it out on her by making her housing situation difficult. I said the lease violations were documented facts. She needed to address them according to the notice. That was all. She started crying then. Real tears this time. Or at least better fake ones than usual. She talked about how hard everything had been since her divorce. How much she loved that apartment. how she couldn't afford to move, how she'd fix everything. She just needed me to understand her situation. I waited until she finished. Then I explained that complying with her lease terms was all that was required. The property management company would work with her on the timeline if needed, but everything had to go through them. She wiped her eyes and asked if we could please just handle this between us. I said no. She left without another word. My phone rang that afternoon. Unknown number. I answered and heard a woman's voice asking if this was Ryan's ex-wife. I said yes. She introduced herself as Thea, Ryan's aunt. I remembered her vaguely from a few family gatherings. We'd barely spoken during my marriage. She said she'd heard what happened with Natalie in the apartment. She wanted to meet for coffee if I was willing. I asked why. She said there were things about the family I should know, things she should have told me years ago. I was curious enough to agree. We set a time for the next day at a coffee shop downtown. She thanked me and said she was glad I'd finally see the truth about Natalie. I showed up at the coffee shop the next afternoon. Thea was already there, sitting in a corner booth with 2 cups in front of her. She waved me over and slid one across the table. She looked tired, older than I remembered from those few family gatherings. She started talking before I even sat down fully. She said Natalie learned how to control people when she was 12, right after their father left. Amelie fell apart after the divorce and leaned on Natalie for everything. Natalie figured out fast that she could manage her mother's emotions, could make Amelie do whatever she wanted by crying or playing victim. Ryan was only 6 then, and Natalie treated him like her personal project. She'd tell him what to think, who to trust, how to feel about things. By the time he was a teenager, he couldn't make a decision without checking with her first. Thea watched it happen and tried to say something to Amelie, but Amelie shut her out completely. The family closed ranks around Natalie's version of reality. Thea apologized then, said she should have spoken up during my marriage. She thought I seemed strong enough to handle Natalie on my own. And I took a sip of coffee and told her I didn't need strength back then. I needed someone to back me up. Support would have mattered more than explanations now. She nodded and looked down at her cup. Then she told me something that made my stomach drop. Natalie had done this exact same thing to 3 other women Ryan dated seriously. 3 relationships before me, all destroyed the same way. She'd position herself between Ryan and whoever he was dating, manufacture conflicts, play the protective sister card. One girl lasted 2 years before she couldn't take it anymore. Another one actually tried to set boundaries with Natalie and got frozen out by the whole family. The third one saw what was happening early and left before it got too bad. Thea had watched the pattern repeat over and over, and nobody else in the family seemed to notice or care. She pulled out her phone and showed me photos from years ago, pictures of Ryan with these other women at family events. In every single one, Natalie was right there, inserted into the frame, her arm around Ryan or her hand on his shoulder. The girlfriends were always on the edges, cut off or pushed to the side. It was like looking at my own marriage in reverse. Thea said she'd testify to all of this if I ever needed a witness. The intensity in her voice surprised me. She really wanted Natalie held accountable for something. Anything. I thanked her and left the coffee shop feeling like I understood the family dynamics for the first time. This wasn't just about me or Ashley. This was a pattern decades in the making. My phone rang 3 days later while I was reviewing property reports. Waverly's name showed on the screen. She told me Natalie had corrected every single lease violation within the 30-day window. The kitchen modifications were reversed by a licensed contractor. She'd submitted documentation proving the party didn't exceed occupancy limits after all. Everything was now in full compliance. I felt impressed despite myself. Natalie was smart enough not to give me any ammunition to use against her. The professional distance I'd maintained was working exactly as intended. Everything stayed documented and legal, no personal drama mixed into business decisions. Waverly said Natalie had been almost pleasant during the final inspection, cooperative and polite. I told Waverly to keep following standard procedures for everything. She agreed and hung up. A message popped up on my social media that evening. Ashley's profile picture showed up in my message requests. She asked if we could meet in person without Ryan or Natalie knowing. I stared at the message for a